So, but you've done film and movies. Do you think sound designers in movies get more respect than sound designers in games? Because it's like a sound is like 50% of a movie. It might be 25% of a game.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd say it can be 50% of the game too. It's again, I guess it would depend on the particular game and how important sound is. But I mean, sound for film is an older, more developed art form and process. So one of the things that attracted, I mean, because when I was finishing up school, those were my two kind of main ideas of where I might pursue a career was film, TV sound, or games. And one of the things that attracted me to the idea of working in games was that there was less established procedure.
Sure.
And because I remember I got to watch how films got made. I got to help with student films, and you know, there's some things as a young guy, like you think, why do we have to do it this way? And you don't understand the history. And sometimes you find out later there's a reason why you do things a particular way, because people spent years figuring out, making mistakes and going, this is a good way to do it. So there's a lot of that maybe in film sound that I didn't understand at the time. And I don't know, there might have been some things that I still don't think make sense. I'm not thinking of examples at the moment, or I'd throw them out there. But the idea that in games there would be more freedom to figure stuff out on my own, and you know, I liked that idea. So it's more of the Wild West of how to do things. Now, at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that's already been figured out for how sound effects work or how sound design works in film, that a lot of me and my fellow sound people in games, you know, there's a lot of, like, you know, everybody loves Ben Burt, and there's this book about the sound of Star Wars that came out like about 20 years ago. Do you have it? It's got the plastic strip thing where you plug some headphones in, and on each page
that's cool.
There's a code, and you type in the code and you hear the sound that he's talking about. And you know, we all had that book at Sony PlayStation in the sound department there. You know, anyway, yeah, so film sound design, we don't ignore the history of that, just like other visual arts and stuff.
Is there anything sound design? Is there anything sound design can take from film sound and game? Like, is there anything game sound design can take from film, and is there anything film sound design can take from games? Like, do they inform each other at all? Like techniques or processes?
Boy. I should be able to think of something, and I know there's an answer for that. I mean, it's kind of a lame version of the answer that I could have for that, which is that when you have a TV series that's based on a game and they use some of the actual source from the game, but that's kind of a weak version of the answer.
I guess my question is sound design in games becoming more like film, because now you have the capabilities of play sound on these devices is approaching the kind of quality you get in the theater.
The fidelity that's possible, we can do stuff that sounds just as good as film these days in games, which it wasn't necessarily true when I started. One thing that just popped into my head is the use of Foley.
Sure.
And when I say Foley, capital F, it's a specific type of sound work that the word gets used for all kinds of things. But what Foley actually is performance of sound using props that make particular sounds. Like the classic would be like coconut shells for horse, but that you do that while you're watching picture and you're synchronizing to what you see, because what you're doing, you only have to edit minimally, but it kind of lines up with picture. So Foley for games is a thing, and it was, I don't think it always was, at least, I mean, earliest games, we weren't even really doing anything that could sound good enough that it would matter.
You're just using the sound ideas library or something.
Well,
and, you know,
before that, maybe I'm thinking even before that, when we were using like just FM synthesis to just make beeps and stuff. But I'd say there's a much more common use of Foley in games where, I mean, for cinematics, obviously, because they're just like linear film. But, you know, like, I'm thinking about how I got to work on very briefly on Destiny, on the Taken King, I think it was, the whatever that was. Like, was it an add-on or?
I think it was like, it was like an expansion.
It was an expansion. Yeah. So there was this kind of series of weapons you could have that were all made out of bone, and it wasn't Foley in the sense that maybe they did. I think Adam, who was the audio director, took maybe some animations of all the different reloads and took it to a Foley stage. And this guy that does mostly Foley for films just got all his bone-like materials and gave me. He came back and he just gives me this whole set of like passes through just making bone sounds that match these movements, and it's just saves you so much time, because I could just be taking sounds from my library of different bones things and then having to line them up manually, but because this guy performed it, it's already like at least 50% of the way to the final thing. I just need to mix things together a little more and kind of slide them around so they match. So yeah, Foley's one big thing from film that I think has helped game audio sound better.
Sure. Yeah, I do like those Instagram accounts of Foley artists where they show them like watching the video, and then they'll take like celery and they'll twist it to sound like broken bones.
Oh yeah. Well, that's another thing about sound design, is it's not always the thing. When you need a sound of a thing happening, it's not always the thing happening that sounds like the thing happening in film.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to hype it and make it more like hyper realistic, and then you use other things like celery for bones. Like, real bones sound too dry and plain, but celery's got much more. It's got that wetness and just kind of more visceral kind of.
And you can control the speed, like with the scene.
And it's not just going to shatter. Yeah. It's like it's more wet and bendy, but it doesn't sound that way necessarily. And you can pitch bend that stuff.
What about those guys that are professional impersonators of animals? You ever use one of those guys? Like there's some guys like in Hollywood, like they're the official guy who does lion sounds with his mouth. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm actually. I've been kind of low-key searching for some actors to do creature sounds. I'm on a game right now where we have a good number of creatures and monsters. And yeah, I haven't found anybody yet, but I know people are out there that do that.
Yeah, because that's not a sound you can, I guess you could, but it's not really an easy sound to synthetically create like digitally. Like somebody needs to perform that monster sound, I guess, right?
Yeah, and like for a lion roar, or even birds, if you take a real bird recording and slow it down so the pitch is closer to a human voice range, and then you listen to what it does, you could make the same sound with your voice and then speed it back up so it's high pitched like the bird, and it'll sound just like the bird. So that's a thing you can do with any kind of animal. Take a lion roar, pitch it upward until it's closer to human.
Interesting.
I've recorded actual lions at the San Francisco Zoo.
Okay.
It was pretty bad environment for it, because at the time they had this thing where they would let lions into this. You'd be in the middle of this room, and there were all these like compartments surrounding the room, and they would let the lions in, and they'd come into these rooms, and then they'd feed them in this room, and you could watch from it. But it was so echoey in there that the recordings we got were just hard to use.